don't mean a place of recreation. I mean a place of recreation, reproducing yourself and your personality. And through this intimate contact, it was possible to become a stronger individual even though you lived in a more collective environment. That world has been eroded and subverted steadily by the encroachment of the factory, of the office, of the supermarket into our own personal lives and finally into our own heads. We think in terms of buying and selling more and more. And I come across this repeatedly when somebody says to me, I don't buy that idea, and in which I respond, I'm not selling it. And I've used this line over and over again, because it is, to me, the typification of the way in which people deal with idea, deal with culture, deal with the most intimate relationships they have. They invest in a marriage. Who the hell ever invested in a marriage? In a business, perhaps, yes, but not in a marriage. So people, in a sense, are being hollowed out. It isn't only television that is doing it. Television, as it were, is filling an increasingly empty vessel. That's what's happening. And they're taking over the world of imagination, taking over that world, that dream world, that magnificent dream world that the child still has and which the rest of civilization repeatedly represses in the course of what we call maturation or becoming mature. Television has begun to fill that in with its synthetic plots, with its advertising, with its one-dimensional pictorial image of what reality is all about. This terrifying problem has made us ask the all-important question that most people do when they encounter an analyst today. Not why do I have a twitch, not why do I have a shudder, why is it that I have dreams that wake me up, why do I wake up screaming at night? Those were the questions that you went to in the 1930s if you had a psychological problem and if you went to a therapist. Now they go around and they ask the question, who am I? Who am I? What am I? Why am I? And the key thing that is involved here is what they're asking is, what is their place in the world? Because there is no place in the world for people to be human again. There is no place in the world for people to be personal and to have a personality. And for that reason we go madly and insanely after all kinds of fashions today to decorate what is a very deep sense of hollowness inside us. We cover ourselves up. We cover ourselves up with different hairdos. We cover ourselves up with different styles of clothing. We cover ourselves up with all kinds of accoutrements. We have to wear Thunderbirds to play Indian. Or we have to wear leather jackets to be tough, even though we may be accountants somewhere. Or we have to dress like prostitutes so we look interesting, even though we may be secretaries somewhere. All of this, we wear boots in the summertime. Who the hell ever wore boots in the summertime? But all of this is meant to make us interesting to ourselves because we are so hollowed out by the breakdown of community, by the mutual networks of support systems, by the rich articulation of a spontaneous cultural life that comes out of the streets and that comes from the intercourse of past as well as present and hopefully future, through the different generational interactions that exist. And we are faced with the real problem not only of whether or not we have power anymore over our lives, but who are we and why are we alive? And that becomes the great therapeutic problem in psychiatry today. This points to a very deep sense of disempowerment, as I said, that emerges from the large corporations, that emerges from the invasion, the enormous concentration of the state, and that emerges very significantly from the marketplace into every recess into which we could retreat 30, 40, 50 years ago, or even 20 years ago. The counterculture was an attempt in the 1960s to recreate again a community in which we could retreat. A network in which we could again develop a sense of identity, a sense of solidarity, a sense of community that has been eroded steadily, not only by television, but by the marketplace, by the buyer-seller relationship, by the reduction of everything to an object, to a thing, to an investment that you either buy, that you sell, feedback, input, output. And that's the problem we face.
Okay, yes. we're bored. We're all bored now. But has it ever occurred to you, Wally, that the process that creates this boredom that we see in the world now may very well be a self-perpetuating, unconscious form of brainwashing created by a world totalitarian government based on money, and that all of this is much more dangerous than one thinks, and it's not just a question of individual survival, Wally, but that somebody who's bored is asleep, and somebody who's asleep will not say no? See, I keep meeting these people. I mean, just a few days ago, I met this man whom I greatly admire. He's a Swedish physicist, Gustav Bjornstrand, and he told me that he no longer watches television, he doesn't read newspapers, and he doesn't read magazines. He's completely cut them out of his life because he really does feel that we're living in some kind of Orwellian nightmare now, and that everything that you hear now contributes to turning you into a robot. And when I was at Findhorn, I met this extraordinary English tree expert who had devoted his life to saving trees. Just got back from Washington, lobbying to save the redwoods. He's 84 years old. He always travels with a backpack because he never knows where he's going to be tomorrow. And when I met him at Findhorn, he said to me, "Where are you from?" And I said, "New York." He said, "Ah, New York, yes, that's a very interesting place. Do you know a lot of New Yorkers who keep talking about the fact that they want to leave but never do?" And I said, "Oh, yes." And he said, "Why do you think they don't leave?" I gave him different banal theories. He said, "Oh, I don't think it's that way at all." He said, "I think that New York is the new model for the new concentration camp, where the camp has been built by the inmates themselves, and the inmates are the guards, and they have this pride in this thing they've built. They've built their own prison, and so they exist in a state of schizophrenia, where they are both guards and prisoners, and as a result, they no longer have, having been lobotomized, the capacity to leave the prison they've made, or to even see it as a prison." And then he went into his pocket and he took out a seed for a tree and he said, "This is a pine tree." He put it in my hand and he said, "Escape before it's too late." See, actually for 2 or 3 years now, Chiquita and I have had this very unpleasant feeling that we really should get out. And we really should feel like Jews in Germany in the late 30s. Get out of here. Of course, the problem is where to go, because it seems quite obvious that the whole world is going in the same direction. See, I think it's quite possible that the 1960s represented the last burst of the human being before he was extinguished, and that this is the beginning of the rest of the future now, and that from now on there'll simply be all these robots walking around, feeling nothing, thinking nothing, and there'll be nobody left almost to remind them that there once was a species called a human being, with feelings and thoughts, and that history and memory are right now being erased, and soon nobody will really remember that life existed on the planet.